Okay, I think that's working. Lauren Wissot, welcome back to the show.
Thanks.
We're so thrilled to have you here. It's been a little while, and our last show was so much fun. So I'm really excited to unpack some of the new writing you've been doing, talking about the Berlinale and also the films you saw online at Sundance. So, God, which one should we start with first? I know recently for Filmmaker, you spoke with the director of All That Breathes about his Sundance debuting doc, Shanok Sen.
Yeah.
Should we start there?
Yeah, if you want, I that one won.
Oh,
It won at Sundance. Actually, most of my interviews won something. Most of the directors won something. I just don't. I don't off the top of my head. I don't know which awards they were. But All That Breeds, yeah, that was an award winner.
yeah, so and it's the Smoggy Deli Sky, and he's following these birds that are mysteriously dying. Is that right?
Well, he's following brothers who are saving the birds. They actually, because of the smog situation in Delhi, they're just dropping from the sky because they can't breathe anymore. And so they're just literally hitting the streets. And so these two brothers just take it upon themselves to go and save the birds. And it's a beautiful story. And it's really, it's got so many layers to it. It's remarkable. It really is.
And these are the black kites, they're called, the birds.
Yeah, and they're not, and because they're not vegetarian birds, that the Hindu population of India is not a big fan of these birds. It's so much so that if they take them to a hospital, they won't treat them. So these Muslim brothers take it upon themselves to treat them. They taught themselves how to treat them. They're basically they have no background in this. They're just completely self-taught. They're on a mission, and they just decided this is a beautiful bird. We're going to save it, and they've opened up a. I think there's a foundation now that they've opened up. It's remarkable, and it's really. I mean, I know why it won. It's just, and then it's got the layers because as you go through the film, they have the situation with the civil unrest on the streets, and it's got a political layer to it. It's got a character layer. It's just yeah, it's really well done.
I think one of the interesting things you talk about with Shanok Sen, the director, is whether the West and press in the West really matters for a nonprofit in Delhi. And you talked about how getting that attention can mean so much money and so much notoriety for a nonprofit in the East, especially doing that kind of work.
Yeah, I think that's just a general situation. I mean, it even goes down to the filmmaking. If you're recognized in the West, you're going to have more funding come your way. It's the state of capitalism. It's the state of a colonial history and of capitalism. That's the way it works. Down to filmmakers getting funding, which is another issue. So
Now, another one that you wrote about recently, it's the doc that's opening Doc Fortnight called Bunker, and it's multimedia artist Jenny Perlin. And I thought this was a nice turn of phrase that it is literally an underground film.
yeah, yeah, it is. It's about a bunch of. She basically took her camera. This was even before the pandemic. She took her camera around the country and followed these men who basically live in bunkers. They live in these military bunkers, these decommissioned nuclear silos, all across America, and they're kind of hidden away. We don't really see them because obviously they're living in bunkers, but they live in everywhere from like South Dakota to Michigan to it's that whole fear driven. I call it like fear driven American dream or something. It's they've really sequestered themselves in these living spaces, and so she wanted to explore their lives and their lives inside these places, And the interesting thing is, I mean, she started filming right when Trump got elected, I think, and then she kept filming, and then right through the pandemic, and it became very timely because a lot of these guys went down there because they're afraid of things like a global pandemic, and there, what do you know? They don't look as crazy as they did maybe at the beginning. So, yeah, I mean, it's nice, and I like the fact that she's very open-minded and non-judgmental, and I mean, I learned a lot about because I just assumed that they were kind of like the militia types, or guns, or like really, and a lot of them weren't. A lot of them were just trying to just have a connection with nature, and I thought maybe they'd have some like hatred towards like society or something, and it really wasn't that at all. So it opened my eyes to a lot of things. It's just a bunch of guys who can't live on the grid for whatever reason, they can't handle being. I almost I don't want to call them all agoraphobic, but it seemed to me like they're not comfortable in society, and so this kind of like they feel more calm and adjusted when they're not around anybody.
Well, and it's almost all straight, middle-aged white men that are
Yeah,
doing this.
yeah. I asked her about that because I found it interesting that there weren't any women. So I thought maybe that she just didn't film with women, but she couldn't find any women, and so it's strange. And she also noted that a lot of these guys kept talking about how they were gonna have like women live with them in these bunkers, but none of them actually did it, and so we don't really know. I mean, they want to build these communities of people living in bunkers, but it seems to be an all male environment. So I don't know. I maybe unless you're homosexual, I don't think it's going to work.
And one scene that especially stood out to you involved a um, character asking if you trusted him enough to drink one of his homemade bunker
Yeah,
concoctions.
yeah, that was creepy. I think I told her. To me, because I mean, she's probably my age. She's not young, but she's like, she basically went around the country just her and a camera, and so I don't know how safe that is. I mean, I would be scared to be doing that, but she let these guys. They went down, and they would like she would sit with them and have conversations with them over days in the bunker. And yeah, one guy offered her a drink, and she wasn't sure if she trusted him or not, but she ended up trusting him, and it worked out. But I don't know. She's a braver woman than I am. That's for sure.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's that survivalist kind of lore, and that's definitely a certain personality type here in the Southwest. So I bet a lot of those people weren't too far of some of the friends you've made here in Santa Fe.
No, yeah, and it's interesting how now that I think about it, she really took a lot of chances. She doesn't seem like she. I don't think she thinks she did. Because she was in conversations with these guys for months, and before she ever went and met them. So she didn't feel like that terrified. It wasn't like just a new. But still, I mean, you're meeting someone in person, and you're meeting them in an underground bunker, and they're shutting you in there. So um, I mean, even regardless of you're a woman or a man, I think that would be kind of a dicey situation. But no, she didn't really view it that way. So that was interesting.
So, and she stayed in touch with some of the participants in the film. I can't
Yeah,
imagine you'd want to
I
stay.
guess she did. I don't know.
However, she did.
Maybe she wants to do a sequel. We don't know yet. So yeah, that was yeah. It's an interesting film just because like I said, a lot of my preconceived notions about. I was expecting them to be like, I mean, that whole cliche of like they're just they're with bunkers and their weapons and they hate society or blah blah blah, but they're actually not. They're a lot of them are just very not, I wouldn't say normal. They're not normal, but they're not they don't seem like vicious like guys with chips on their shoulders, let's put it that way.
And it's coming up at True False as well, or am I
I
confusing
don't
that?
think that one is. No, I'm not. I don't think that one is. There's a couple of them that are. What else? What else coming up at True False? There's several that are coming up at True False, but that I don't think that's one of them. Maybe it is. I could be wrong.
You
I
know,
need to look it
this
up.
Yeah, this next one was at Sundance. It's called The Mission. Your headline is LDS folks are the same whether they're North Americans or Finns, and it's by Tanya Anderson. And I think I'm guessing it must be about Finnish
It
Mormons.
is. Well, no, it's not. It's about American Mormons in Finland. There are Finnish Mormons, but that's not really who she's following. She's following Mormons from here, and the Mormons have to go on their mission, and you don't get to pick what country you go to.
Welcome back. We're talking with contributing editor from Filmmaker magazine, Lauren Wissot. She also writes for Modern Times Review in Europe.
It's just she followed these handful of uh, teenagers and young adults who are assigned to go to Finland and practice their mission. So yeah, I mean that was another eye opening one. It's a sweet film, and it really I mean I have like my own issues with the Mormon Church and with like I don't know. I mean it's a weird situation because it's not a film that the Mormon Church would object to at all. It doesn't necessarily shine them in like an amazing light, but it doesn't it's really it's almost less about the church than it is just about these young adults, coming of age as Mormons, and so there's something really special about that, and so I appreciate it for that. I think it was smart filmmaking in terms of focusing on the young adults rather than focusing on the mission.
Yeah, and God, it's got to be wild to see all these American Mormons in Finland and kind of get a peek into that world, I'm guessing.
Well, yeah, I mean it's I God bless them literally because because first of all I don't know if you heard Finnish, it's impossible. It's one of those languages that no one except Finns speak.
Well, I know you haven't been done until you've been finished, but that's the
Yeah.
extent of my.
No, I mean I've spent time in Scandinavia, and all my friends in who are like Danish or Norwegian, and they like the Danes, the Norwegians, the Swedish, they all understand each other. No one understands the Finns at all because it's just a completely different language. So yeah, to send these young adults over there with this really difficult language that no one speaks, is that's hard enough. But they're dealing with a culture that is very very secular. So a lot of times, they're just kind of basically blown off, or people try to like talk them out of being Mormon, and it's rough. It's not I mean it's a great they're and a lot of them are. I mean, if you're in Helsinki, that's one thing because people speak English there, and it's a very cosmopolitan city. But if you're in one of the little tiny, I mean, I don't know. I've only been to Helsinki. I haven't been to the little tiny ones, but I'm assuming the tiny ones are much more difficult to get around in.
Yeah, God, that's a fun interview. So that film's called The Mission, and if you get a chance to see it, please do. But also check Filmmaker magazine for Lauren Wissot's interview with Tanya Anderson. Another one that I just thought was fascinating was Rita Baghdadi on Sirens, the Sundance premiering doc, or is it
That one,
Slave to Sirens?
no, it's Sirens. The band is Slave to Sirens. That one's playing True False. I know that. And that one is such a crowd pleaser. I was actually shocked it didn't win. I thought for sure that would win like an audience award or something. And yeah, it's a feminist, very much a feminist Middle East sort of documentary with heavy metal, or because they're a band in I believe Lebanon, and it's all female, and they are hard rockers. So it's a lot of fun to watch them, and at the same time see them navigate a very patriarchal society as well.
Yeah, they navigate friendship and sexuality, artistic vision, and international fame, all within the explosive confines of Lebanon's often misogynistic and homophobic society, you wrote.
Yeah, yeah.
And,
And then the port blows up. During filming, it did.
oh, wow.
Yeah, no, it really did.
And is that they catch it in the film?
Yeah,
Oh
yeah,
wow.
she was there when it happened, so it's very bizarre. Yeah, it's an explosive film in many different ways, and plus it's got music. So what more do you want? You know,
Yeah, and I mean, were you previously a fan of heavy metal, or was this?
I'm not at all, but I mean I like punk, but I'm not necessarily a
Yeah.
metal fan. But it's just fun to watch them rock out because they're like, how often do you see chicks from Beirut rocking out like that? You know.
Now another one that I think we can touch on. This is Snow Nin A Lang. Midwives is the name of the
Yeah,
film, and the
good job.
director.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I don't know if I mean kudos to you for trying to even pronounce her name because I have no idea how that's pronounced. Yeah, yeah, that one won as well. That one actually I had been hearing about since like 2019 because I was at Hot Docs years ago when that was pitched at the forum there, so I knew it was going to be something special. But yeah, that's special because it's very difficult to get information out of Myanmar, and she's a director from Myanmar, and she studied in the capital, and so she has access that a foreign journalist or a foreign filmmaker would not have because no one can get in there. But it's beautiful. It's a story between two midwives, one Muslim and one Buddhist, and they managed to make it work. And it's another one of those films where a lot of your preconceived notions about like the Rohingya and ethnic hatred, and you realize on the ground those hatreds aren't there. A lot of the stuff is, I mean, there's racism, there's xenophobia, but the actual hatred where they're like ethnic cleansing each other, a lot of that stuff. I'm not saying it didn't happen; it did happen, but you're also dealing with a military dictatorship, and so it's very sticky. And it's interesting to see that once the military coup happens and once the military comes in and starts cracking down, well, then the Buddhists and the Muslims band together because everyone hates the military, you know. So it's not what you're going to see on the evening news. Let's put it that way.
And before this, did you have an opinion about midwifery? Was it something that you
No,
were?
not at all. I mean, it's. I didn't know anything about mid. I only was interested in it because I'd heard it pitched at Hot Docs, and I knew it was going to be something because I knew it won Hot Docs. It won the forum there, so I knew it was going to be someone. A lot of people thought it was going to be something special, so that's what I was interested in. I mean, honestly, I don't really care. I'm one of those critics that doesn't care about subject. I'll watch anything. I'm much more interested in this, as they say, the storyteller than the story. I want to know who's directing. I want to know who the crew behind it. If I'm more interested in like the auteur theory, I guess, and that even goes to documentaries for sure.
That's something that I've really always admired about you. You know that it's often not what it is, but who it is, like
Yeah,
you just said.
yeah,
And I'll say, well, what about that? And you'll say, oh, well, I love his work. I'll watch anything
yeah,
that he does or anything she does.
yeah. But it's and that's when I get in arguments with other people who are like, they could start raving about a subject, and I'll be like, but it's if the filmmaking isn't done well, I don't really care. I mean, you can have the most important subject in the world, and if it's not done well, I even if I love the subject, I'm going to turn it off after 20 minutes. You know, it's just going to bore me. So
I was at a
yeah,
cafe in Cannes, and this young Frenchman was telling me he was very excited about going to A Hero, the new
oh
Oscar
yeah, yeah,
Farhadi.
yeah, it's
And
wonderful,
I said, I read the synopsis of it, and it seemed really not that. It didn't
interesting.
really
Yeah,
grab me. It wasn't very
but he
interesting.
said it's for Hottie,
And he
right?
said it's
You
Farhadi.
have to
So
watch it, of
I think
course.
a lot of times it's how they get there, not
Yeah,
what it's about.
absolutely, absolutely. Because if you're a great storyteller, you can take any material and make it interesting. You know. And I think people forget about documentaries. It's the same thing. It really is. And I mean, that's kind of like my pet peeve is I really, really get annoyed when, I mean, there's a lot of festivals that will give awards to the subject or the character, even if it's not great filmmaking. And I think it's ridiculous, you know?
Yeah, I think that's why it's so important to have a really solid jury and a
Yeah.
really good process when it comes to that. A hero went on to play at the Santa Fe Independent Film Festival and win our Audience Choice Award.
Yeah,
And
he's a great filmmaker. You know,
yeah,
he
yeah.
can't do a bad film. He just can't.
So, maybe we should go to a little break, and when we come back, maybe we can delve a little bit more into auteur theory. Do you want to say anything about it before we go, or?
No, I think yeah, that was my opinion. Yeah, for sure.
Okay, so we're talking with Lauren Wissot. She's contributing editor for Filmmaker magazine and also writes for Modern Times Review, the European film publication.
Yeah.
And we'll be right back with more. We're going to talk about a few more of the films she's seen early this year that are brand spanking new. And we'll also get a chance to hear more about why auteur theory is so important to Lauren. Stay tuned. We'll be right back with more. We're talking with Lauren Wissot from Filmmaker magazine. She's contributing editor. She also writes for Modern Times Review in Europe. So stay tuned for more Film Talk Weekly. Wissot of Filmmaker magazine. And we were just getting into auteur theory. I know that's a important thing for you in your work. Is is there a way I should ask you a question about it to kind of start it, or do you want to just kind of break down, how much it means to you and how much it means to have a film by the vision of a singular artist?
Um, I I don't know. I think a lot of us, a lot of people. I mean, ever since like the French New Wave happened, and the whole idea of a singular voice, uh, it's been around for a long time. I guess I'm kind of surprised that it doesn't apply to documentaries a lot of times. I'm actually kind of surprised by that because I think it makes sense. Filmmaking is filmmaking. It doesn't really matter whether you're telling a nonfiction story or a fiction story or somewhere in between. Um, I don't. Um, I guess the way to put it is I don't really see the difference between nonfiction and fiction, which is why I also don't really care about like hybrid films. I don't. I think that's completely legitimate. I think it's legitimate when there was that whole controversy with using Morgan Neville's what was it, the Roadrunner doc, the Anthony Bourdain, and he put in a bunch of AI generated snippets for his voice. And I just like there was a huge brouhaha, and it was a big media controversy. People arguing that he shouldn't have done that because it really wasn't Anthony Bourdain's voice. And I'm like, what is this? Who cares? It's. I don't really understand with. I mean, I wish someone would explain it to me because I don't understand what the big deal is. It's like all the way back to like Nanook of the North. I mean, these things were staged. I mean, there's never been such a thing as a true objective documentary that just never existed. So when people start blurring lines or making hybrid films or so-called hybrid docufiction, I've never really understood why people have a problem with it. Um, so yeah, so I guess that doesn't really answer your question about auteur theory, but that's kind of where I'm at in general. I think if it applies to fiction, it should also apply to nonfiction. I don't understand why we separate these things.
Well, I think often a documentary is made by a single director.
But you have to understand it's a single director with a specific vision, right? So it's like even Errol Morris will say that or Frederick Wiseman and all the great ones. I mean, it's they're not objective. There's an editing process. There's a way you place the camera. None of this stuff is objective. This is all subjective. So when people start like thinking there's some sort of like absolute like ecstatic truth with documentaries, it's just a ridiculous notion. That's not how these things get made. So yeah, so as long as that's why I tend to look for the auteur or the author of it because I know kind of what they're probably gonna their I know what their vision is. Even if it's a documentary, there's gonna be a subjective vision. So I know what their subjectivity is about.
I'm glad you brought up Errol Morris. Maybe you can tell us a little bit about how significant he is. I know you're a huge fan, and maybe this is just a chance
Well,
to say something nice about
I
his
don't know.
work.
I hated American Dharma, so I don't know if we want to go there. Um, he got played. I am a big fan of Errol Morris. He's obviously done a huge amount for documentaries, and But he's one of those people too that I loved Wormwood, his Netflix series, and Wormwood was staged. It wasn't a straight documentary. It was a combination between there was actors and there was, I mean, they had a lot of stuff staged. So he even does that. Yeah, I wasn't a fan of American Dharma, which was this Steve Bannon film, which is.
I know you didn't like the Rumsfeld one as much as something
No,
like.
I didn't have a problem with the Rumsfeld one. I had a problem with the Bannon one because I just felt like, and I was actually, and I had I'll be honest with you. The part of my personal gripe with that one, I literally saw it at a festival, and I was sitting about a foot away from Earl Morris, and they asked him to come up afterwards, and he started like complaining about how no distributor would pick it up and blah blah blah. And I'm thinking that's because it's not a good film. It's like, because I mean, Alison Klayman did a great film called The Brink about the same subject, and her Steve Bannon doc got picked up, and it's actually, you can see it on Hulu now. It's fantastic. So I don't like when filmmakers complain about the hardship of like oh, politics is keeping me I guess canceled or something. No, it just wasn't a great film.
Well, and there's a reason Steve Bannon was always behind the camera prior.
Well, Steve Bannon, I just felt like he got kind of. I mean, I love Errol Morris as a filmmaker. He's a great filmmaker. There's no disputing that. I just thought he got played. I think Steve Bannon took advantage of him, and he wasn't able to really gain control of the situation. So.
Yeah, I think The Fog of War was one of the most important films ever made.
Wonderful film. Yeah, absolutely.
And what he got, the way he got McNamara to open up, I think that was really.
Oh no, in terms of his entire body of work, he's a fantastic filmmaker, and I wish he would actually do more fiction or more hybrid films, because I just think he's got a talent for it. He actually started the whole idea with the Thin Blue Line, where he was using staged sequences, and back then people had a problem with it because it was like scandalous, but now it's just par for the course.
Now, another film that premiered at the Berlinale, Europe is the title of the film.
Yeah, speaking of docufictions, exactly.
Directed by Philip Scheffner and Merle Kroger.
Yeah, the writer is Merle, I think.
And it's a work you wrote is a work at once simple and complex, as its title might imply. Europe is the name of a bus stop, specifically in a small French town of Châtellerault, where the main character Zora, an Algerian citizen, catches a ride from her housing block flat to her job sorting secondhand clothes at an NGO-run warehouse, and also to various doctor and physical therapy appointments, her reason for coming to France in the first place. Fortunately, the numerous surgeries and treatments for her debilitating scoliosis have now paid off, and she's finally able to stand up straight and pain-free. But then they use her recovery as a way to kick her out of her government housing? Is that...
No, they use her recovery as a way to kick her out of the country. France won't let her stay. She has scoliosis, and the French government allowed her to come to France for treatment. So she's been through treatment and surgeries and year after year after year, and she has her family members are there. She's got a job. She's an upright citizen, but they won't let her stay because now she's so cured. Now that she doesn't need surgeries anymore, they want to kick her out. So it's a horrible situation that she was in, and because of that, the filmmakers decided to turn the documentary into a fiction film, and it started as a documentary, and once she was notified that her residency permit was not renewed, they switched it into a fiction film and just staged a lot of other things. They're very much political filmmakers, so they've always done documentaries, but I think this was he just felt like it made more sense to do it as a fiction film.
Yeah, and I think a theme within it is that no human is illegal. And God, I mean, it must be a terrifying situation to think, oh my God, here's my new life in France. And then know you're actually going to be, now that you're healthy, you're going to be whisked back to Algiers. which I mean, God, I saw a documentary by that Brazilian director about him tracing his father's roots in Algiers, and it's a fantastic
Well,
place. But I mean, it's really suffered with their economy, I imagine.
well, yeah, but the point isn't Algeria. I mean, Algeria is, there's nothing particular about. I mean, this happens all the time, all over the world. People get kicked out. That's the issue. It's government policies that are the focus. I mean, whether it's Algeria or Portugal or the point isn't the country. They're not. She's not claiming political asylum. She's not claiming that she's being like that she fears for her life to go back there. That's not what she's claiming at all. She's just claiming that I have built a life here, and there's something very like Orwellian about you're allowed to stay as long as you're suffering, but the minute that you're not suffering, then we need to kick you out of the country. It's like there's some very sort of colonialist sort of I mean, I hate to read too much into it, but that's that like white savior thing. Like we'll save you, but then once we save you, we're done with you, and we need to kick you out. You know, it's we're going to toss you to the side. So it's that sort of thing. It's really less about what country she's from or where she's getting. You know, I mean, there's no reason why she can't go back to Algeria. It's not like she's going to be killed or something. It's not a situation like that. But it's just there's something wrong with the French government's mindset, the bureaucracy that allows you to come as long as you're sick. But the minute you're well, we don't want you anymore.
Welcome back. We're talking with contributing editor from Filmmaker magazine, Lauren Wissot. She also writes for Modern Times Review in Europe.
There's also another one from the Berlinale, No Simple Way Home, and it's A Cool Day Mabior.
I don't know how to pronounce that one either. That's you've got me on that one and snow, the midwives, Myanmar and South Sudan. Yeah,
And hopefully I was close with
yeah.
my attempt at pronouncing
Apologies
it.
to Snow. I think everyone just calls her Snow.
So this is South Sudanese director
Mhm.
Akulde Mabior, and No Simple Way Home, you say, is a gorgeous example of what African filmmakers can accomplish if Westerners would just get out of their
Yeah,
way.
yeah. No, there's a whole series of films. There's I think 20 something. It's the Generation Africa project, and it's a project out of South Africa. And it's all Africans. They're all the filmmakers are African, all the producers. And they're really talented, and they don't come with a Western point of view. They come with their own point of view. It's like they're Africans telling African stories for Africans, and if the West happens to be the audience, the West happens to be the audience. But we're not. They're not trying to do films for us, which is really really refreshing.
You talked with her. Was there a translator? Did she speak English? I'm guessing.
No, she speaks English. They speak English there, so she's like yeah, she speaks perfect English. I mean I mean they speak that, and she lives in Nairobi, Kenya, where they also speak English. So yeah,
So there's another film, House Made of Splinters, and did you see that as part of Sundance Online?
it was part of Sundance, and I've known the director for years. Really really talented Danish filmmaker, but he's been working in Ukraine for years. He's been doing all his films there, and it's very timely because he's been following the situation on the front lines. He shoots in eastern Ukraine in the Donbass region on the front lines, but he doesn't do war stories. He does the lives of the people living in the war zone, but it's not about the war. It's about the people who happen to live there, and they're in different situations. And so they're really beautiful character studies, and the war obviously is in the background of everything, but it's not, like I said, it's not about the war. It's about the people who happen to live in those places. So beautiful film. Yeah, it's about an orphanage. It's not so much an orphanage. It's like a way station. It's these kids who are taken from their parents because they've had a war going on since for almost a decade, and so there's fallout. And one of the biggest biggest pieces of fallout is the opioid epidemic and the alcoholism, and you have a lot of parents who have, you know, aren't able to take care of their kids anymore, and so it's kind of this way station for these kids to. They stay there for like 9 months or something like that, and they at the end of it they see if the parents can take them back or if they need to go to an orphanage, and he just follows these young little kids. Oh, and that's the other thing about Simon, he only follows kids. He only does films about kids.
And this is Simon Lorang Wilmot.
Yeah, sweet guy. And I actually met him in Kiev years ago, obviously before the war, but I met him. I was in Kiev for they have a wonderful documentary festival called Docu Days, and so yeah, that's where I met Simon and first became aware of his work. And yeah, we took a plane back to Copenhagen after the festival, and so I got to spend time. And just a really sweet, very, very open-minded, caring filmmaker. I can't say enough about him. Really, really talented.
And this is A House Made of Splinters?
Yeah, beautiful film.
By Simon Lorang Wilmot.
Yeah, and he got nominated for Academy Award last year for Distant Barking of Dogs, which is another film about kids on the front lines in Ukraine. So we'll see what happens with the latest flare-up, and I'm sure if he can go back, he will, but I don't think he can go back for a while because of the situation right now. So we'll see.
Yeah.
It's scary. No, I mean, I'm very nervous for the people that I know over there.
Let's see, it premiered in the World Cinema Documentary Competition. Did it win?
I can't remember if that was one of the. I think it might have. There was about. I think I did 8 interviews and 5 of them won something or something like that. So,
you sure know how to pick them.
Yeah, well, I got lucky.
Yeah, there's another film by Christine Choi. Did you want to mention?
Oh, The Exiles. That's a cool film. Yeah, that one is Violet Columbus, and I'm spacing the director's name. Violet Columbus is Chris Columbus's kid. But yeah, it's about Christine Choi, who's a fantastic documentary filmmaker in her own right, and she went back to find the dissidents that she interviewed after the Tiananmen Square massacre back in 89, I believe.
Yeah, and that guy lived, right? Is that part of it?
No, it's about 3 dissidents that came over here. They were leaders in the protest movement, and they had to leave the country. And so when they were over in the States, she started following them, and then she never did anything with the footage. And so she went back to revisit with these new filmmakers. They were her former students. They followed her around as she tries to reconnect with these men from so long ago to see how they're doing, what their living situations like, and it's a really nice journey. And Christine Choi is a firecracker. Let's put it that way. She is no nonsense, like in your face, chain smoking. You know, she's got cojones. Let's put it that way. So she's fun to watch.
She says her first rule of documentary film is lie to everyone.
Yeah, that'll tell you everything you need to know about Christine Choi. So she's a legend. She really is.
Kind of fits with the theme of what we were talking about earlier. There's a doc called Tantura. It's Alan Schwartz.
Yeah, that was disturbing. That one is, that's basically about a war crime situation that was committed during the war of, what do they call it, War of Independence?
Al-Nakba.
Al-Nakba, yeah. Yeah, that is definitely one of those films that takes you down a rabbit hole. Yeah, that one was about it's more about in a weird way, it's more about the cover up or about the rewriting of history than it is about the actual situation. So he goes back and interviews all the soldiers and makes them listen to their statements from the statements they gave, and it's kind of a circus, but I don't want to give too much away. That one definitely has a lot of spoilers.
Yeah, Alan Schwartz's Tantura takes its title from a particular Palestinian village that was depopulated by any means necessary, including through a still contested massacre of civilians during Israel's 1948 War of Independence. You right. You say the doc is less a history lesson than a deep dive investigation into the stories a nation chooses to tell about itself. And I think that is timely. I mean, I know in the U.S. we have a similar lore of the I guess history being written by the winners.
Yeah, it always happens. So yeah, it's the same thing, but it's interesting because it's more also about the people that the Israelis who want to go back and tell the real history, and a lot of them has they're either silenced or the government wants to like blur the lines, and so there's a real pushback to anyone who wants to. But I guess that's the same here as well. I mean, we have anyone who wants to like dig things up is not necessarily welcome.
Lauren, thanks so much for joining us. This was another really fun show, and it's so important for our little radio show to have somebody who's really writing about the movies and writing about such new movies. So thanks again for coming on, and I hope to have you back again soon.
And I hope all these films come to Santa Fe somehow.
Yeah, I think we've got a really cool
2022 programming for the Santa Fe Independent Film Festival. There you go.
Yeah, we've got a very good film festival here, and we've got some amazing little independent theaters, plus the Violet Crown showing so many independent movies. I think it's hopefully we
They'll
get
be
to see
here.
them all.